Hi, I'm Spencer Krause. I've been building robots for over 20 years. In that time, I've seen a lot of interesting things, and I've heard a lot of interesting stories. Collaborative with Spencer Krause is a place where my colleagues and I can relax, crack a drink, and talk about some of the crazier things we've seen at work and some of the experiences we've had that have gotten us to where we are today. Subscribe today to join the collaboration. Welcome to the Collaborative Podcast. I'm your host, Spencer Krause. Our guest today is Chris Grill. Chris is a senior robotics engineer at SKA Robotics and an all-around great guy. Chris, welcome to the pod.
Thanks, buddy.
Good to have you here, bud.
I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. So you had kind of an unorthodox path into robotics. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of had an unorthodox path throughout my entire life with everything.
Awesome.
You know, it's kind of hard to trace back, to what point exactly started me on my robotics career. There are kind of a number of them, I think. Some of the bigger, more recent ones was, I was working at a medical device manufacturer where we were setting up an automated forging cell. And that's where I kind of got introduced to, giant automobile manufacturing level ABB, hydraulic robotic arms and how to set them up and working in an automated cell. And that, kind of most recently sparked it. I started just kind of tinkering and getting interested in it from there. Still was doing just kind of regular software engineering and over the years built up enough experience to finally break into robotics. And, it's been about 7 years or so that I've been working primarily in the robotics space.
That's awesome, man. Well, and before that even, I feel like, you figured out software engineering on your own, right? Like you didn't go to school for it.
That's right. I took a couple classes over the years, but yeah, most of that really honestly started in high school in the 90s. The first real introduction I had to programming was I took a computer class in the computer lab in high school, and the teacher was really cool, Doug Kipperman. He would let me take naps in his office as long as I completed my tasks for the school's bulletin board system. So it was like a really forward-thinking computer class, and we were the first, high school that got an internet email gateway in the state hooked up to our bulletin board system. But one of the tasks that he gave me was actually, I don't remember what year it was in the 90s, but the big Kobe, Japan earthquake happened. And he asked me, he had some friends that had previously lived in Japan, and they had family members there, and they were worried and wondering if their, families had been listed in the list of the dead. So I downloaded, the list of people that they were finding in Kobe, Japan, and I was going through it manually, looking for these names of people. And I just thought there's got to be an easier way to do this. And that's, that started me into like bash scripting and regular expressions and kind of took me down that road. And that's really what kind of kicked off, software engineering for me. I had kind of I had always been exposed to it a little bit, even in grade school, right? I remember being in the Apple IIe computer lab, and we were supposed to be learning how to type, I think. And, instead me and my friends were like finding out weird things that you could do. Like, oh, this key sequence, causes the screen to go blank and then come back in a bunch of colors and completely restart the machine,
We were doing that kind of stuff too.
Yeah. So, always tinkering with that kind of thing. But that was the first thing where I realized that like, oh, you can process information with a computer and, make things easier on yourself. So.
That's awesome. What was some of the other stuff you remember from like the 90s computer days? I talked to Peter Seif about this for quite a while when he came on recently.
Yeah, there was a lot of cool stuff. Me and my friends that were all kind of computer nerds, and we all worked on the BBS system, the Wildcat BBS system. We would all go to Barnes and Nobles and get the latest 2600 magazine, of course. So we were all into 2600 and.
For the audience, 2600 was the Hacker Quarterly.
It's still around.
I didn't even know it was still around.
Absolutely. Yeah. You can go into the Barnes and Noble right now and buy a 2600.
I didn't even know they had Barnes and Noble anymore. That's awesome.
Yeah. There's one over by my house. I pick up a 2600 every once in a while.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
What's in it these days? Like I remember it used to be like exploits for like basically like how to break into cars, and like it was just everything.
It runs the gamut, right? And it's still pretty much the same, right? I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of it is, there's a sort of a higher level of computer security articles in it now, but there also is a lot of that kind of low tech, hacking type stuff.
Yeah, just like, hey, they left this gaping security hole in this thing.
Yeah, so it's it's largely unchanged as a format, right? So
do you remember the QCat from Radio Shack?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, so it was like a barcode scanner that you could get where you would run it across because they couldn't afford to have it like scan in one dimension or two, so you had to do that. And the idea was I think they were trying to get data because they would give them away for free, and then you could like inventory stuff.
No, it was so that you could. I mean, maybe that was one of the applications, but the one big one that I remember was you were supposed to use your QCat to like scan a code in the Radio Shack catalog or something, and it was like a way of placing an order.
So it was just making it easier to
right.
buy stuff from. I was under the impression you could use it for all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
even
you could.
Non-Radio Shack items.
Yeah, it was a general purpose barcode scanner, right? But if I remember right, I think that was like one of the angles was like, oh, you check this out. Modern technology. You can scan a UPC and order something.
Right, but like I think they also just wanted to know what people were scanning. Like I feel like it was like one of the first big data things, and like there was an article in 2600 about it. I might be wrong on this, but I remember like being a kid in the 90s reading this article, and it was called Decline Your QCat. And what was in the article was like if you cut a certain trace on the PCB
like
with like an
jailbreaking
X-Acto knife, then like it wouldn't report your data back to Radio Shack. So like like you could still use it to like catalog your personal shit, but
Yeah. No, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure there was an element to that. Yeah, I think I actually remember that issue. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting.
But yeah, I did the whole thing with the I don't remember if it was called the red box or what, but it was the one where Hallmark had like those cards that would play a recorded sound or something.
Oh yeah, I remember those.
And you could get it to play back the sound of the tone that the quarter made dropping into a payphone. If anybody remembers, you used to have payphones around town where you would put quarters in and you could call people. But yeah, so I had made one of those, and I think I made
with the Hallmark card.
Yeah, and I think there was another one. I think the
Captain Crunch whistle was like where the blue box tone came
that
from
was
too.
that was like old school. That was way before the 90s. I think that was like 70s freaking days.
Yeah.
PHREAKING freaking.
Yeah.
Right? The phone freaks and all that stuff. Yeah. But yeah, so we were always, me and my friends were always, reading 2600, and Tone Loc was another one. I don't know if anybody remembers Tone Loc, the war dialing program. Super cool, old DOS style program, and you could put in a prefix and it would just dial every number in that prefix.
I'm sure people love that.
Oh, I remember when I first started doing it, and because we're using a modem, right? So it was just doing it all night long. The little the little modem sounds, and my dad was like, "What the hell is going on here?" And it's like, and I think I even told him, I was like, "Yeah, it's this program that dials every number in a prefix, looking for other modems." He's like, "Oh, okay."
What does it do when it finds another modem? Like,
so it had like this grid screen that would it was almost like a heat map or something, where it would like graphically show you where in the prefix matrix or whatever it hit on computers, and then I think you could click on it, or it had some kind of logging where it would just show you like, yeah, I got a modem answer at this number, or this fax number answered at this number.
Oh, so who's got fax machines, so they can start sending whatever.
Well, so I mean, the idea was so that you could find who's got modems, so that then as a user you could connect to that modem and see if it was open, see what kind of system it was. So I actually got myself a voicemail box on at one of the local apartment complexes, because when I hit the modem, I was actually able to get into their old OS2 warp system that was running their voicemail box and set up my own voicemail box. So this was the days of pagers. Yeah. Right. So all my friends had pagers, and I started giving out my voicemail number and telling people like, oh, well, if you want to meet up somewhere, just leave me a voicemail. So yeah, I found that one with Tone Loc.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Did they ever find it and like shut it down, or you just had it forever, like until?
That's a good question. I don't remember. Because as far as I know, I mean, nobody knew that I had it. You know what I mean? It's not like I went in there and started deleting people's voicemails or anything. You know, I just went in and set myself up a voicemail, and there it was. You know,
That's hilarious.
so yeah, it's pretty fun. Fun
Dude,
times.
the 90s.
Yeah, fun times.
Yeah. So, I mean, from there, I guess, what are some of the things you did, like with programming, that kind of got you to robotics? So,
Yeah, I mean, I was always interested. You know, I mean, at first I did, you know, sort of a lot of, you know, web-based programming stuff. I think the first thing I actually got paid for was like an Access database. I don't know,
like Microsoft Access?
Yeah, Microsoft Access. That it was like an application that I did for somebody in like Visual Basic.
That's hilarious, just knowing how much you hate Windows now.
Oh, yeah, well, and I mean, it's funny. Somewhere I think I have a copy of it, and it's like I hesitate to do it, but like I kind of want to show people, especially new programmers, like how utterly atrocious it was when when I had no understanding of like object-oriented programming, or, you know, there's tons of like repeated code and a bunch of different functions in this thing.
I learned how to program on a TI-83 plus graphing calculator in 6th grade.
Nice.
Like, I was writing programs to make seating charts, and like it would always seat me next to my best friend, but was otherwise random.
Nice.
And then we made a text messaging program where you had to connect the link cables between the two calculators.
That's awesome.
And it would fetch the messages from the other calculator after you hit send, but there was no buffer, so you only got the last thing they typed.
Nice.
So if you sent 2 messages, you just screwed.
Well, you could program those in assembly, and did they have their own language or something?
It was TI Basic. So
TI
we
Basic,
ran it
yeah,
on TI Basic.
Yeah, nice.
But yeah, I don't think I knew how to do, like, I don't know if it wasn't capable of it at the time, or if I just didn't understand how to code it. But like, I didn't know how to do, like, you know, I could only do a single thread. So like, you know, if I was like running the program, it was just at a prompt. And so you had to like hit enter after you type your message, and that's when it would like run all the fetch. And
Nice. That's great.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you know, the Access database thing was like the first thing I got paid for. And then I realized, you know, like, oh, okay, I can make money doing this stuff. But I was always kind of drawn to, you know, I'm also a ham radio guy.
Awesome.
I have my general license. You know, so I've always loved and been into like electronics and sort of that lower level of stuff, and kind of where the bare metal is. And, you know, so at that medical device manufacturer, for instance, I was doing, you know, a lot of like embedded stuff and interfacing with like DAC cards, and, you know, doing a lot of lower level interfacing work.
Awesome.
And just always kind of loved doing that side of it. And, you know, even when I was working, for instance, you know, I did a long stint doing like primarily e-commerce web applications, which, you know, didn't you know, tickle that part of my brain, right?
Yeah,
so,
of course not.
So I was always doing stuff at home anyway, you know, doing that, whether it was, you know, learning how to, you know, program Arduinos when they came out or whatever.
The Arduino was a game changer when that thing came out, because you used to have to get a basic stamp.
Yeah, the basic
things were
stamp, or,
terrible.
you know, the UPIC. I don't know if you remember
The OPIC.
Yeah.
I always called it an OPEC, but it was OOPIC.
Object-oriented PIC or something. Yeah.
UPIC.
Yeah.
People
you
would
know,
put like 3 of those together, because they were like, they might have also been like single threaded, right? So you had to like have multiple
I think so. Yeah, because
ones
they were. I don't remember what. I remember taking because all they had was like a sticker on it. They were just rebranding something from Microchip. I think that was like it was a PIC that they put some kind of firmware on that you could, you know, upload your precompiled stuff. But so you know, I was always tinkering and messing around with that stuff. And then when I started to get really want to get back in robotics, you know, I started doing like a lot of online coursework, just so I could start, you know, understanding what people in the robotics community were talking about, and, you know, studying, you know, pathfinding algorithms, and, you know, and learning how to program that stuff in simulators, and, you know, MATLAB and stuff like that. And then, you know, got my first real job in the robotics industry in, you know, 2017, I think, maybe 2016.
Would that have been
or 2017.
Seegrid, or?
No, so that was at IAM Robotics.
Nice.
Yeah.
Legendary.
Yeah, so, you know, it was super cool to work there. I mean, I think I was like the 13th employee or something.
Oh, that's awesome.
You know, I had also at that point had like a lot of warehouse management experience, working with like warehouse management software, and they were a warehouse robotics company.
So they recruited you for that.
That was a big part of it. They also, I had also started doing stuff in data science at the time. So they were looking for somebody that kind of had, multiple skill sets. At an early stage startup, obviously everybody does everything, which was really cool there. Right. So yeah, I came on, started working on rewriting like the fleet management software, what kind of turned into their enterprise, software side. But because there were so few of us, I got to work on everything. I mean, I worked on, the microcontroller that was interfacing with the wheel encoders and feeding that information up. And, I got to do like a proof of concept for integrating a LiDAR on the robot. And,
nice.
Just a lot of really, really cool stuff with like a super cool team that, I'm still close with now. Right?
Dude, there were so many good people on that team. I mean, you took it like guys like Nick Kirsch and like John Cameron,
Mark Renfrew, Yash. Yeah. I mean, just, Vlad.
Vlad's the man.
Local legend. I've literally been on location with him where something happened. There was a component, I think it was like a voltage regulator or something that somehow blew out on the robot or something. And we were all trying to
legendary.
We were all trying to figure out like, oh, okay, well, I guess we're sunk. Like we can't, Radio Shack doesn't exist anymore, right? There's no place to just like run down in Rochester, New York to get this part that we need. And Vlad's like, wait a minute. And he runs down to his car and brings his car charger back up and like starts disassembling the phone charger from his car and starts pulling components out of it and like resoldering stuff and got everything up and running.
That's awesome.
In like a matter of 30 minutes. So
dude, that guy is such a bad motherfucker.
Oh yeah. He's great, man.
Yeah.
He's
I like Vlad a lot.
But yeah, so, such a cool team there that, I learned just so much, just from working with those guys. It was really incredible.
Yeah, that's awesome. Did you know that Collaborative with Spencer Krause now has a merch store? Please go to cwskmerch.com for the latest in CWSK styles. You can get a hoodie, like the one I'm wearing, t-shirts, hell, we even have whiskey glasses. Everything in the store has custom art that our team worked really, really hard on. So go ahead and show your support for them, me, and the rest of the CWSK team by going to cwskmerch.com today. Better yet, support yourself and use discount code podcast10, all one word, all uppercase, for 10% off your entire order. Thanks for your support and enjoy the rest of the show. With Spencer Krause is sponsored by SKA Robotics. If you're in the market for elite field robotics expertise, please consider hiring SKA Robotics. They sponsor this podcast and solve some of the toughest engineering problems in the world. SKA Robotics can be found at skarobotics.com. Are you comfortable telling the Chimera story from there?
Yeah. That was pretty funny.
Also,
man.
Shout out to Joel Reed.
Yeah. So, at one point, when Joel was the CEO there, we started getting phishing messages from people that were like, "Hey, it's Joel. This is an emergency. I need you to go down and get me a bunch of, Android store cards or whatever from Target."
So normal CEO request.
Right. Yeah. Totally normal. Makes sense. Right. So I've actually had like a long history of going along with like a lot of these scam things. I kept one guy busy for days. He pretended to be the power company and they were like on the way to shut the power down or something. And, it's a whole nother story, but I had him on the hook for days at a time. So I decided on this one, I'll go along with this, and just see what I can do and like keep these people busy. I told him like, hey, okay, I'm going to go down to the bank and pull out money, and of course they're like, well, don't tell the bank what it's for, So through this series of events, I convinced the guy that he got me fired because we found out that he's not really Joel Reed and I took all this money out, So in order to compensate me for getting fired, he was going to teach me how to be a hacker and teach me how to do this gift card scam. So then, I asked him, after I kind of buddied up to him and he agreed to teach me, I said, well, what should I call you? And it was something completely mundane, like Dave or something. And in real life, I was totally dejected because I was hoping that he had like this really cool hacker name. So I said, well, shouldn't we have like hacker names or something? And so he came up with like Dark Angel or something ridiculous, So I went to I literally went to something like hackergenerator.com or something, and it came back with Chimera in like leet speak, so it was like C4, 1, M3, R4, And so I kept it going for as long as I could. Then I just ran out of time because I was on my way to the Netherlands.
That's what it always is, man. You can only spend time for so long in this sort of things.
But I changed my Slack name at IAM to Chimera, so everybody was always slacking.
Did you have a picture to go with it?
I don't remember if I put an avatar on there or not, but then I ultimately like published the entire chat transcript on one of the local servers so like everybody could have access to it. So.
Oh, that's awesome.
But yeah, it was great. So yeah, I became known at least on Slack as Chimera. It's pretty funny.
I think maybe in SKA's Slack you should be Chimera.
maybe. Or maybe I just need to generate a new hacker name.
Yeah, you need a new hacker name. What was the one with the guy from the power company, just while we're on hackers?
Yeah, so it was the classic they're going to be there in 30 minutes to shut your power off. And they had reached somebody in the accounting team. It was a different company I worked for, but they came to me and were like, does this make sense? And I'm like, of course it doesn't make sense. Like, have you guys gotten any notices from a power company? So again, it was like this whole thing where he wanted me to go get gift cards and, told me to get the ones that were made out of cardboard. Don't get the plastic ones, So of course I came back and told him I accidentally got the plastic ones and, I'm not going to be able to go back to the store until the next day. So then the next day
the power company needs gift cards.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He's calling me to make sure I got the right ones. And so I got, so I tell him like, okay, yeah, I definitely got the right ones. And he's like, all right, well, scratch it off and give me the code. So I said, okay, it's ID 10T, and so I did like the whole ID 10T error.
What is ID 10T?
It spells out idiot if you write it out.
That's
funny. So he's like, are you sure that's the code? I'm like, yeah, I'm definitely sure. And he goes, and then finally he goes, oh, I'm an idiot. He's like, you think that's funny? I'm like, so I'm like, dude, don't you think that was a little messed up that you were trying to trick me into giving you free money? He's like, and he goes, yeah, I guess, and then hung up.
Yeah, I guess.
I felt when he said that, I felt like I had successfully beaten him down over, days. He thought he had somebody on the hook, and then it was like, yeah,
he probably spent a ton of time on it too.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so you were at IAM Robotics. Where did you end up after that?
So after that, I really wanted to work remotely, and an opportunity came up in the fintech world.
Oh, cool.
So I went into fintech for a while because it was a remote position. My start date actually was the day that everybody went into lockdown for COVID. So everybody at IAM was like, man, you should have just stayed. You would have been working at home anyway. So I did fintech for a while, but it just, after finally working in robotics.
So you just left because you wanted to be remote.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Working in fintech was just not fun for me. So I knew I had to get back into, something robotics related, something with some real world component. So I stayed there for about a year and then got back into robotics via Seegrid.
Nice.
So I worked at Seegrid for a bit. Which was really cool.
Well, I feel like you found a happy medium with that. Like you're mostly remote at SKA Robotics, but like you come in when there's
and that's how Seegrid was, right? It's like I took home like one of the the HMI and camera units and was able to use simulation to do stuff at home for the most part. But then when I needed to actually run it on a truck, I would go into the shop. Awesome. And that's how I work now, right? It's like I bring bits and bobs home and work on them there, and then when I actually need to run something in the lab, I head up to the lab.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the best, right? I mean, and to be honest, I was doing that for years, right? I mean, I started SKA Robotics, with credit card debt like 10 years ago, and we couldn't afford an office, so it was just a bunch of people working from home, and like the first project we ever did was like in one of the engineers' parents' basements, like at the very beginning. We made no money on it. Actually, I lost $7,000 doing that project.
But I like working that way.
There's nothing wrong with it.
It's effective for me. If I want to take a nap at lunch, I can just take a nap, and I don't have to like go hide in my car somewhere. I've worked places where it's like, well, what were you doing? out there? It looked like you were sleeping, And it's like,
yeah, I'm a human being.
I was on lunch. What do you care if I'm eating or if I'm sleeping?
Yeah, I'm off.
Yeah, who cares, right? So yeah, it's nice to have that flexibility, but obviously, I'm into robotics because I enjoy it and I enjoy programming something that has an effect in the real world, right? So, I like having a lab to go into and play with stuff. So
no, it makes sense. I mean, I think it's a super effective way to work. So Seegrid, what was some of the stuff you got to do there?
Seegrid was cool. I mean, again, it was one of those things where, I kind of was able to touch on a lot of different stuff. I worked on the truck software team, and what I really enjoyed doing there, they had like a rotation, where, every week sort of one or two engineers were assigned to dig into bugs from the bug board, right? And that was honestly sort of my favorite thing to do, especially being a new employee, because going through all the bugs. You
actually wanted to do that?
Yeah, going through all the bugs. I mean, I did that a lot at IAM too, right? It's like
awesome.
Going through the reported problems of a system is sort of to me anyway, for me, is the best way to really get to understand the system, because you're everywhere, right? You're not focused specifically on a single subsystem. It's like you never know where the bug is actually coming from. Somebody reports some weird behavior, and as you're digging through to figure it out, it's taking you all over the place in the system. So that was sort of my favorite thing to do there was go through the.
Well, I'm sure everybody loved you if you were doing that and just bug bashing.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody appreciates when somebody is into that and doesn't look at it as something where it's like, oh God, I've got to look through bugs or whatever.
It's
a
like puzzle.
Exactly. It's a puzzle, and I enjoy that aspect in software engineering in general, but especially in robotics. It's interesting to figure out why did this thing run into something that made this huge noise? It's like, let's try to stop that from happening before we deliver it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so that was fun. From there, I went into EV charging for a startup out of Palo Alto, which is not directly robotics related, but also.
I mean, it's hardware.
Yeah, so, similar stuff. Working on some of the embedded. I was doing a lot of embedded Linux there. Things like that. And then, then discovered SKA Robotics.
Happy to have you in the team, buddy.
Yeah, man. Happy to be a part of it. It's cool that we get to work on like a lot of different projects, I mean, one of my other favorite things is working on like proofs of concept and, starting from scratch and trying to figure out how fast you could get to something that, that at least sort of works and can demonstrate a specific technology. So, I appreciate that, the way we do things, I've been able to come up with, a number of kind of proofs of concept of stuff and also, take things through the finish line. So it's a cool setup. So I'm loving it.
Awesome. Yeah, me too. Right. I mean, I've always kind of enjoyed the puzzle, just working in different domains, taking ideas from, over here and bringing them over there. And so, I mean, just getting to be across industries is kind of a treat, Yeah,
it's super cool. And I think, for me, I learn a lot more by doing that, right? Like I said, like with the bug smashing stuff, it's like you learn more as you're doing different things and making those connections in your brain of like, oh, this is just like when we did this other thing in this other area, and we can, pull ideas over, and it's a cool way to work.
Well, I love that, like, just the videos you send over Slack where you'll like take the initiative to figure something out and then be like, hey, I got this. I
got this thing that kind of works.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we should be able to do this at a reasonable time.
Take it down the line.
Right. Yeah. So it's cool. It's cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, no, it's been really rewarding working with you too. I feel like I've learned a lot from you. I mean, I enjoy kind of your willingness to dig into all sorts of different aspects of a problem. I mean, the broad breadth of knowledge you've got just from all your different hobbies and like background and like just eclectic work experience is amazing. So like the fact that you know about like antenna simulation, like, and also like you can run an oscilloscope and also like, right, like high level software or firmware,
Yeah, a lot of that
like
stuff.
A bit of FPGA.
A lot of that stuff came from, the ham radio thing, which I really have my grandfather to thank for that. So
that's awesome.
Shout out to Lou Grill, WB6CQA.
Lou Grill.
Silent key now. That's what they call dead ham radio operators.
Sorry, man.
Yeah, he passed a number of years ago, but yeah, I mean, I remember as a kid hanging out in his radio room and talking to people in New Zealand and just being like amazed that we could do that.
How do you do that? I mean, it's because it's the planets in between, right? So
yeah, so it's
satellite based or
no, it's refraction actually. So a lot of people think that it's reflecting off of the ionosphere, but it's actually refracting radio waves.
So I'm an idiot.
This like periodic refraction off the ionosphere, and that's why ham radio operators are always so interested in like what's happening with solar activity, right? Because you want favorable conditions for propagation in the ionosphere. I've been getting more into satellite communications.
Oh, that's
lately,
interesting.
To be honest, yeah. So I've been volunteering again now for the amateur radio AMSAT, amateur radio satellite organization, on their engineering team. So
So what do you guys do there?
build satellites, build and program satellites.
Do you send them up?
Oh yeah, I mean
So you've launched things into orbit.
I have not yet.
Yeah.
I haven't. This the engineering cycle on these is pretty long. So
What's
the
the
one that
engineering
I'm
cycle?
well, like the one that I'm getting involved in now, they've been working on, I think since last year, and I think the launch is projected to be in 2026 or something.
Oh yeah, so like 2 years.
Yeah, 2 or 3 years, kind of a thing.
Yeah, that's not ridiculous.
No, not at all. But I haven't actually launched anything yet. But
I mean, I'm sure there's like project management that goes into hitting that timetable too. If you've got a launch book.
oh yeah, for sure. I mean, they're working out of like all the same guidelines and stuff that NASA does. Because NASA ends up being in charge of clearing stuff for launch and certifying.
Well, and I
all
mean
that stuff.
the fact that like the only people that had the budget to go to space for so long were like the government and NASA's.
Yeah, but amateur satellite has been around for quite some time. I mean, I think the first ones that they sent up were in like the 70s.
I had no idea.
Oh yeah, it's been around for a while.
How did they launch stuff in the 70s? I thought it was like expensive as heck to do.
Well, I mean, they would have to piggyback it on another launch. They weren't.
But they just let these guys do it.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a working relationship between the the amateur satellite groups and
didn't know this was
NASA
a thing.
that's been around for quite some time. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Also, a lot of it's done through universities and university research. Which ties into working with NASA and getting something getting a spacecraft launched. So yeah, it's really interesting. I'm learning a lot. So a lot of really cool stuff to learn about spacecraft communications and spacecraft design in general. I mean, I'm not working on those parts of it, but there's people on the team that are doing the mechanical design for a spacecraft and the propulsion and
that's awesome.
the attitude control and all this stuff.
What do you use for propulsion on a system like that?
So from my understanding, it's mostly done with I don't think they're actually doing propulsion on this particular one, but they're doing like attitude control with reaction wheels.
Huh.
I don't know if you're familiar with that at all.
I mean, imagine it's like
it's
just
new
a
to me. I'm
spinning
not
wheel and you use gyroscopic precession.
That's what it seemed. So far, that's my grasp of it. I mean, I'm me. I know enough about mechanical engineering to like talk to machine shops, but
I mean, that's more than most people know.
I'm slowly starting to grasp like what it means, to control a spacecraft. So it's interesting to see, these people work that have all this sort of, almost esoteric knowledge.
So attitude control is like roll, pitch, yaw. If I'm just
right, yeah,
correct. Okay.
keeping the spacecraft oriented so that you can communicate with it. Right.
That's cool. I mean, it seems like the verbiage is different in space than it is in robotics, but it's not that different.
Not that different. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I'm starting to dig in. I'm currently working on a master's in engineering management.
Hell yeah.
Right, but it's hard to also not pick up a bunch of other courses because of all these other interests I have. Right. So now through my school, shout out to University of Colorado Boulder.
Yeah.
I have access to all their online classes. So I'm now taking. I've signed up for a spacecraft kinematics class.
Oh, that's awesome.
I'm learning all this new terminology because I found it so interesting. How do you keep these things oriented when they're tumbling around? So yeah, learning a lot about how to determine attitude and how to control it. So it's pretty neat.
That's really
trying
cool.
to not let it affect my other classes that I have to take because this one doesn't actually count towards my master's. But it's this stuff is just so interesting.
Dude, I found out when I was a University of Pittsburgh student that I could take one CMU course like for free every semester through a thing that nobody knew about. And so ever since I took Howie Choset's Intro to Robotics, I took John Dolan's Mechatronic Design, like both really good classes. But the Howie Choset class was like more work than like 4 PIT classes I was taking at the same time combined. And it did not at all count toward my computer science degree or my business degree. It didn't help me at all.
Right.
But it was so much fun. Like I just, I didn't even care. I just, I wanted to do well in that course, and that was the one that I really loved. And I was like drawing pictures of like robot subsystems in my notes and all my other classes.
Nice. Yeah, right. Like for my master's program, it's like I don't really need to dig into vector differentiation and stuff, but now I am because I'm taking this kinematics course, and it's super interesting. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm forever trying to learn something or getting caught up in some new hobby. I think I was telling you earlier, I at one point, and I still have a bunch of books on it. And one day, like maybe when I retire, I'll be able to do this. But one of my goals in life is to hand grind my own telescope lenses out of Pyrex and like hand make a telescope. So
that is wild. Like that is the furthest thing from anything I've ever thought to do, but I love it. Like this is super interesting.
I honestly don't remember how did you
get it in your head?
How did I even get that in my head?
Why not just buy stuff from Edmunds Optics?
Right. Why not? Right. But in my mind, it's I have this thing where I have
gotta be Galileo.
Well, I have to get to the bottom of something to understand it. Like I have a problem of just taking things on face value of like, yeah, you just buy some lenses. It's like, well, how are these lenses being made? And then it's, then awesome. I look into like these industrial processes of lenses, and then, I'm sure it was some random post on the internet that was like, or you could hand grind them out of Pyrex like this one guy did. And it's like, wait, what? Somebody hand ground them out of Pyrex?
You're the guy I want to get stuck on a deserted island with. I feel like we're going to have a blender like making smoothies within a week.
Right, yeah. The professor on Gilligan's Island, right? A radio out of coconuts or something, what I was actually, I thought that, was really cool when we did that project last year that we're now going to get an RBR 50 award for.
We will have won it by the time this comes out.
That's right. I thought it was really cool that, as someone who actually ended up, seeing how the mechanisms went together and putting some of them together, our mechanical engineers did a good job of like not doing that classic thing of like designing something so cool that you can't put it together or you can't take it apart effectively. Like why did they put this?
Well, that's
screw
because
here?
we used like senior engineers and they peer reviewed each other's work.
Right,
And they caught
and it
that
was
stuff
it
before
was
we
like
sent it to manufacturing. And
when you and the mechanism was so small, it's like initially I was thinking this thing is never, I'm never going to be able to who's going to be able to do this, right? Like it's such a tiny thing, but the way they did it, it's like everything fit together nicely, and you could get to the screws and you could get to the mechanism. They did an incredible job of doing that.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, one of my advisors said to me, good engineers DFA. So I think that just comes from experience.
Yeah.
Like you're right out of school or you're earlier in your career and you make something and you're going to bolt it together and you're like, fuck, how do I get a screwdriver at that screw,
Right.
And there's no way to do it because there's a panel blocking it. And so you have to get the stubby screwdriver. You have to get like a right angle screwdriver and like do that thing. Or you have to get a ratchet and hold your hand over it and do that. And no, don't do that.
Right.
So
right.
You kind of learn through error.
It shocks me. I do a lot of my own like vehicle work too. Similar thing. It's like always, every car I buy, I have to get like the factory manuals and, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But it's like the automobile
I used
industry,
to do that. I haven't for a while.
They either still haven't figured that out or they're intentionally making things hard to work on. I haven't figured it out because I went to like replace an oxygen sensor in my wife's car one time. And it's like the approved method was like to completely remove the upper intake to get to
There's got to have been a better way to do it.
Right.
I feel like sometimes with cars, it's a space constraint issue because they're trying to fit in so much stuff. And like maybe it's systems engineering, like the group that's doing the oxygen sensor is not talking to the intake group, so they take their space claim. And so
I don't know, man. Now that I've seen what SpaceX did with like a typical rocket engine, have you seen the pictures
just removing
of like,
parts and making it?
Yeah, and it's like what is this here for? Like I think sometimes some of these auto manufacturers should probably start doing some of that type of optimization of like, why do we do this? Just because we've always done it?
A lot of it
let's
comes
remove
down to
that,
systems engineering too. I mean, like what do we need? Who gets
Yeah.
what space claims? Like, what's the architecture? Where's that going?
Sure.
What is it there for?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's, again,
Yeah.
that's another thing where, as, a senior engineer, quote unquote, now that I'm getting old, right? You start seeing the need for that type of stuff. And, Robot Operations Group is another perfect example.
Oh, I
right?
love Robot Operations Group.
Yeah, it's great to
Hey,
get,
Joe and Florian, how you doing, guys?
yeah, shout out to those guys, right? It's,
Yeah, they're awesome.
It's cool to see, like, man, we build a lot of really cool stuff, but without some kind of operational plan for this, right? Nobody's going to use it, right? So
100%.
Stuff like that, I think, when you're a younger engineer, just kind of starting out and figuring things out, you don't think about the systems engineering. You don't think about how this works, in relation
Concept
to
of
other systems.
operations, process map.
Right. Project management, how important project management is
Right.
to stuff.
You can't just make your satellite all in the last week.
Right. Right.
There's only so much Red Bull.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And if, a little bit of project management and pre-planning goes a long way to, to not having to have those, crazy late nights where you're just throwing stuff together and just let's get this thing to work.
Oh, for sure. I mean, that's a contingency plan. It's good
Sure.
to know that you can always do that.
Sometimes it
if,
still happens.
the crap hits the fan or somebody, quits or, gets hit by a bus or something. You've got options, but I mean, that should not be the plan A.
That shouldn't be your normal mode of operation.
No,
right?
of course not.
Yeah, let's just put it together, make it work. Like, no, let's plan this out. So
I don't know. Some people never figure that out. Like there's people I went to school with that I'll see now and I'm like, I'll see them like up at 3 a.m. working on something. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, how did you
how did you get yourself into this situation?
How'd you get into this situation?
Yeah.
Like just plan an extra few days, like set your milestones, have your punch list, checklist when you're in this office so you don't forget the tools you need when you're at that office.
Even just a little bit, right? A little bit of planning is going to save you.
Yeah, have somebody else check your work, like, hey, anything I'm forgetting, the punch list is here if anyone needs to add anything.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah. I mean, but that comes from experience. Like, the reason that I plan things out like that is because I've used to not plan things out like that, and it's fucked me so many times, and I've been up for days on end, and just miserable and cursing, and like. I don't want to ever do this again.
Yeah. Some people don't learn from screwing themselves over. It's like, I definitely have, right? It's like, I mean, me, right? Like, I don't want to be up at 3 a.m. doing something if I don't have to be, and the reason I don't like that is because I know what it's like. And I know that, typically when it happened, it was primarily my fault. It's like, okay, well, let's learn from this and never do this again.
That's a growth mentality, man. Like, I mean, it's just, you can either be the kind of person that's like, oh, my life sucks. I had to be up at 3 a.m. Like, I fucked up.
Yeah,
I had to be up at 3 a.m.
Right.
I'm never going to fuck up that way again.
Yeah,
this is exactly what went wrong. I see where it happened. Okay, next time I'm going to plan, and I'm not going to do that.
Right. Right.
So,
yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, like, what would you tell, somebody that wants to get into robotics engineering? Like, maybe, I don't know, at the high school age, somebody that's in a job they hate, that's like an adult, but like maybe wants to make a change and is technically adept. Like, first, like, who should be a robotics engineer, and like, why would you want to do it, and how do you do it?
So, for the answer of who should be a robotics engineer is anybody that is excited about robotics, right? My advice would be, if I can do it, you can do it, right? A long time ago, when I first started wanting to learn calculus, I picked up it's sort of like a really old book, but it's famous, Calculus Made Easy.
Nice.
I think it was originally written by like Sylvanus P. Thompson or something.
Who's Sylvanus P. Thompson?
Some guy that wrote this cool calculus book in like in like 1913 that had this cool old sounding name, But one of the phrases that he had in there was something along the lines of like, if these other fools can do it, certainly we can, or so,
I love that.
Something like that, where it was like, look, people make stuff sound way harder than it is. Rocket science isn't even really rocket science. It's like if you're excited about it and you're passionate about it, and you really want to be involved, you can do it. Right. I mean, I came through this like completely, non-traditionally. Right. I don't have, a degree. I'm working on a master's degree, but I don't even have a bachelor's. I just happen to find this cool program that, lets you in based on the work that you do, right?
Yeah, I mean, you found a backdoor way to interview at Google, though, just from like, like you.
Yeah, that was kind of cool. There's always a way to do something if you really want to do it, right? I mean, I know that. I also don't want to discount the fact that like people have bad situations too. I get that, right? But I grew up in a trailer park, for instance, and low income apartments, and so I understand that like people, there are situations that you have to try to get yourself out of, and that's not always possible. But if you keep swinging the bat, right? If it's something that you really want to do, eventually you'll be able to do it. And to the point that you made earlier, have a growth mindset. Learn from your mistakes and learn from other people's mistakes. I've seen a lot of people go down really bad roads. Growing up in the areas that I grew up, and people that were just as smart or smarter than me.
Oh, same here.
That just made really terrible decisions and never learned from them, and ended up in worse and worse situations. If you're interested in it and you love doing it, then go for it. I mean, you realistically, I'm not as interested as I am in, for instance, the spacecraft kinematics. I'm probably not going to design an attitude control system. I mean, the potential's there. If I really truly wanted to do that, there's a pathway for me to do that through this, this organization that I work with. But I'm still going to get to work on something that's going into space, right?
Yeah.
Which is really the cool thing that I want to do.
Every self-respecting engineer wants to work on something that's going into space.
Right. So, if you really want to work in robotics, go for it, do what you have fun doing, and B, understand that, you may not always get to do the super cool thing that you may think you want to do, but the harder you try and the more effort you give, the more that you are going to be able to do. If I would have had the attitude of like, oh, well, I don't have a degree, I'll never make it in robotics. I'm in job interviews up against these, crazy cool people that, that have degrees from CMU. If I would have had that attitude, I would have never made it in here.
I would take you over 10 PhDs.
No, I appreciate that, but yeah. I've worked with a lot of these people, and they're all great, and they all have something to contribute. So
well, I think the degree is, I don't want to say it's irrelevant because it takes a lot of work, and I don't want to discount. I have a master's degree in robotics. Like, I don't want to say it's like it's not an accomplishment, but like I think for me, like it's much more of an accomplishment, like what you do out in the real world and on the job. And that's what I really look at is like
Yeah, and I think everybody's got their own way to contribute too to the industry as a whole, right? I mean, we need academics just like we need, technicians, right? So, I mean, that's something that we've run into, right? Is a shortage of qualified robotics technicians. So
yeah,
it's really,
for sure.
It's awesome to see some of these local community colleges, putting together robotics technicians programs to get these people trained up.
I've heard good things about Westmoreland County.
So have I. We have an excellent robotics technician intern, Andrew.
Is that where he goes to school?
Yeah.
I had no idea. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I feel bad.
Yeah. So he's, I thought that's why you were mentioning that.
No. I've just, our buddy Zach from Siemens Energy was talking about how awesome it is. And the Catalyst Connection guys always talk about how great it is.
I know they've got a cool program there.
I did not know Andrew was in that program.
And
Andrew's a great guy.
CCAC's got a cool program. They were at PRN Discovery Days, and they had a lot of interesting stuff going on. So yeah, that's another path, right? If you want to be involved in robotics, start looking into what it takes to be a robotics technician. Learn how to put things together. Learn how to run test equipment.
Yeah, for sure.
So there's pathways to doing everything.
Yeah, 100%. Well, hey, I think that's probably like a really good note to end on. Is there anything you want to plug as we near the end of the episode?
No, I don't have anything to plug. I don't know. Join AMSAT, AMSAT.org. AMSAT could always use, your membership and funding. Donate to AMSAT.org. That's it.
Cool. Yeah, join AMSAT, everyone. And if you want to do something really cool in robotics, hire SKA Robotics.
There you go. I guess I could have plugged that, but
nah, it's all good, man. I didn't need you to shill our company. It's fine. All right, Chris. Thanks for having you on, man.
Right on. Thanks, brother.
Thanks for joining us today. If you've made it this far, chances are you'll like other episodes too. Collaborative with Spencer Krause can be found on YouTube, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, and Radio Public. Subscribe today to get notified when the latest episodes release and support the channel. Collaborative with Spencer Krause is sponsored by SKA Robotics. If you're in the market for elite field robotics expertise, please consider hiring SKA Robotics. They sponsor this podcast and solve some of the toughest engineering problems in the world. SKA Robotics can be found at skarobotics.com.